Matthew Henry's Commentary on the Whole Bible. Joshua 15. Though the land was not completely conquered, yet being, as was said in the close of the foregoing chapter, as rest from war for the present, and their armies all drawn out of the field to a general rendezvous at Gilgal, there they began to divide the land, though the work was afterwards perfected at Shiloh, chapter 18 verse 1, etc. In this chapter we have the lot of the tribe of Judah, which in this, as in other things, had the precedency. 1. The borders or bounds of the inheritance of Judah, verses 1 to 12. 2. The particular assignment of Hebron and the country thereabout to Caleb and his family, verses 13 to 19. 3. The names of the several cities that fell within Judah's lot, verses 20 to 63. The lot of Judah, 1444 BC. 1. This then was the lot of the tribe of the children of Judah by their families, even to the border of Edom. The wilderness of Zin southward was the uttermost part of the south coast. 2. And their south border was from the shore of the salt sea, from the bay that looketh southward. 3. And it went out to the south side to Male Akrabim, and passed along to Zin, and ascended up on the south side unto Kadesh Barnea, and passed along to Hezron, and went up to Adar, and fetched a compass to Karka, for from thence it passed toward Asmon, and went out unto the river of Egypt, and the goings out of that coast were at the sea. This shall be your south coast. 5. And the east border was the salt sea, even unto the end of Jordan. And their border in the north quarter was from the bay of the sea at the uttermost part of Jordan. 6. And the border went up to Beth Hoglah, and passed along by the north of Beth Araba, and the border went up to the stone of Bohan the son of Reuben. 7. And the border went up toward Debir from the valley of Acre, and so northward, looking toward Gilgal, that is before the going up to Adumim, which is on the south side of the river, and the border passed toward the waters of En-Shemesh, and the goings out thereof were at En-Rogel. 8. And the border went up by the valley of the son of Hinnom unto the south side of the Jebusite, the same as Jerusalem, and the border went up to the top of the mountain that leath before the valley of Hinnom westward, which is at the end of the valley of the giants. Northward. 9. And the border was drawn from the top of the hill unto the fountain of the water of Nephtoah, and went out to the cities of Mount Ephron, and the border was drawn to Bala, which is Kirjathjearim. 10. And the border compassed from Bala westward unto Mount Seir, and passed along unto the side of Mount Jearim, which is Chesalon, on the north side, and went down to Beth Shemesh, and passed on to Timnah. 11. And the border went out unto the side of Ekron northward, and the border was drawn to Shikron, and passed along to Mount Bala, and went out unto Jabneel, and the goings out of the border were at the sea. 12. And the west border was to the great sea, and the coast thereof. Judah and Joseph were the two sons of Jacob on whom Reuben's forfeited birthright devolved. Judah had the dominion entailed on him, and Joseph the double portion, and therefore these two tribes were first seated, Judah in the southern part of the land of Canaan and Joseph in the northern part, and on them the other 7 did attend, and had their respective lots as appurtenances to these two. The lots of Benjamin, Simeon, and Dan were appendant to Judah, and those of Issachar and Zebulun, Naphtali and Asher, to Joseph. These two were first set up to be provided for, it should seem, before there was such an exact survey of the land as we find afterwards, chapter 18 verse 9. It is probable that the most considerable parts of the northern and southern countries, and those that lay nearest to Gilgal, and which the people were best acquainted with, were first put into 2 portions, and the lot was cast upon them between these 2 principal tribes, of the one of which Joshua was, and of the other Caleb, who was the first commissioner in this writ of partition, and, by the decision of that lot, the southern country, of which we have an account in this chapter, fell to Judah, and the northern, of which we have an account in the 2 following chapters, to Joseph. And when this was done there was a more equal dividend, either in quantity or quality, of the remainder among the 7 tribes. And this, probably, was intended in that general rule which was given concerning this partition, Numbers 33 verse 54, to the more you shall give the more inheritance, and to the fewer you shall give the less, and every man's inheritance shall be where his lot falleth, that is, you shall appoint 2 greater portions which shall be determined by lot to those more numerous tribes of Judah and Joseph, and then the rest shall be less portions to be allotted to the less numerous tribes. The former was done in Gilgal, the latter in Shiloh. In these verses, we have the borders of the lot of Judah, which, as the rest, is said to be by their families, that is, with an eye to the number of their families. And it intimates that Joshua and Eleazar, and the rest of the commissioners, when they had by lot given each tribe its portion, did afterwards, it is probable by lot likewise, subdivide those larger portions, and assign to each family its inheritance, and then to each household, which would be better done by this supreme authority, and be apt to give less disgust than if it had been left to the inferior magistrates of each tribe to make that distribution. The borders of this tribe are here largely fixed, yet not unalterably, for a good deal of that which lies within these bounds was afterwards assigned to the lots of Simeon and Daniel 1. The eastern border was all, and only, the salt sea, verse 5. Every sea is salt, but this was of an extraordinary and more than natural saltness, the effects of that fire and brimstone with which Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed in Abraham's time, whose ruins lie buried in the bottom of this dead water, which never either was moved itself, or had any living thing in it. 2. The southern border was that of the land of Canaan in general, as will appear by comparing verses 1 to 4 with Numbers 34 verses 3 to 5. So that this powerful and warlike tribe of Judah guarded the frontiers of the whole land, on that side which lay towards their old sworn enemies, though their two fathers were twin brethren, the Edomites. Our Lord therefore, who sprang out of Judah, and whose the kingdom is, shall judge the mount of Esau, Obadiah 21. 3. The northern border divided it from the lot of Benjamin. In this, mention is made of the stone of Bohan a Reubonite, verse 6, who probably was a great commander of those forces of Reuben that came over Jordan, and died in the camp at Gilgal, and was buried not far off under this stone. The valley of Acre likewise lies upon this border, verse 7, to remind the men of Judah of the trouble which Achan, one of their tribe, gave to the congregation of Israel, that they might not be too much lifted up with their services. This northern line touched closely upon Jerusalem, verse 8, so closely as to include in the lot of this tribe Mount Zion and Mount Moriah, though the greater part of the city lay in the lot of Benjamin. 4. The west border went near to the great sea at first, verse 12, but afterwards the lot of the tribe of Dan took off a good part of Judah's lot on that side, for the lot was only to determine between Judah and Joseph, which should have the north and which the south, and not immovably to fix the border of either. Judah's inheritance had its boundaries determined. Though it was a powerful warlike tribe, and had a great interest in the other tribes, yet they must not therefore be left to their own choice, to enlarge their possessions at pleasure, but must live so as that their neighbors might live by them. Those that are placed high yet must not think to be placed alone in the midst of the earth. Caleb's inheritance, 1444 BC. 13 And unto Caleb the son of Jephunneh he gave a part among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, even the city of Arba the father of Anak, which city is Hebron. 14 And Caleb drove thence the 3 sons of Anak, Sheshai, and Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. 15 And he went up thence to the inhabitants of Debir, and the name of Debir before was Kirjath-sepher. 16 And Caleb said, He that smitteth Kirjath-sepher, and taketh it, to him will I give Achsah my daughter to wife. 17 And Othniel the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave him Achsah his daughter to wife. 18 And it came to pass, as she came unto him, that she moved him to ask of her father a field, and she lighted off her ass, and Caleb said unto her, What wouldest thou? 19 Who answered, Give me a blessing, for thou hast given me a south land, give me also springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and the nether springs. The historian seems pleased with every occasion to make mention of Caleb, and to do him honor, because he had honored God in following him fully. Observe. 1. The grant Joshua made him of the mountain of Hebron for his inheritance is here repeated, verse 13, and it is said to be given him. 1. According to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua. Though Caleb, in his petition, had made out a very good title to it by promise, yet, because God had ordered Joshua to divide the land by lot, he would not in this one single instance, no, not to gratify his old friend Caleb, do otherwise, without orders from God, whose oracle, it is probable, he consulted upon this occasion. In every doubtful case it is very desirable to know the mind of God, and to see the way of our duty plain. 2. It is said to be a part among the children of Judah, though it was assigned him before the lot of that tribe came up, yet it proved, God so directing the lot, to be in the heart of that tribe, which was graciously ordered in kindness to him, that he might not be as one separated from his brethren and surrounded by those of other tribes. 2. Caleb having obtained this grant, we are told. 1. How he signalized his own valor in the conquest of Hebron, verse 14, he drove thence the 3 sons of Anak, he and those that he engaged to assist him in this service. This is mentioned here to show that the confidence he had expressed of success in this affair, through the presence of God with him, chapter 14 verse 12, did not deceive him, but the event answered his expectation. It is not said that he slew these giants, but he drove them thence, which intimates that they retired upon his approach and fled before him. The strength and stature of their bodies could not keep up the courage of their minds, but with the countenances of lions they had the hearts of trembling hares. Thus does God often cut off the spirit of princes, Psalm 76 verse 12, take away the heart of the chief of the people, Job 12 verse 24, and so shame the confidence of the proud, and thus if we resist the devil, that roaring lion, though he fall not, yet he will flee. 2. How he encouraged the valor of those about him in the conquest of Debir, verse 15, etc. It seems though Joshua had once made himself master of Debir, chapter 10 verse 39, yet the Canaanites had regained the possession in the absence of the army, so that the work had to be done a second time, and when Caleb had completed the reduction of Hebron, which was for himself and his own family, to show his zeal for the public good, as much as for his own private interest, he pushes on his conquest to Debir, and will not lay down his arms till he sees that city also effectually reduced, which lay but 10 miles southward from Hebron, though he had not any particular concern in it, but the reducing of it would be to the general advantage of his tribe. Let us learn hence not to seek and mind our own things only, but to concern and engage ourselves for the welfare of the community we are members of. We are not born for ourselves, nor must we live to ourselves. 1. Notice is taken of the name of this city. It had been called Kirjath-Sepher, the city of a book, and Kirjath-Sana, verse 49, which some translate the city of learning, so the LXX. Polis Grammaton, when some conjecture that it had been a university among the Canaanites, like Athens in Greece, in which their youth were educated, or perhaps the books of their chronicles or records, or the antiquities of the nation, were laid up there, and, it may be, this was it that made Caleb so desirous to see Israel master of this city, that they might get acquainted with the ancient learning of the Canaanites. 2. The proffer that Caleb made of his daughter, and a good portion with her, to any one that would undertake to reduce that city, and to command the forces that should be employed in that service, verse 16. Thus Saul promised a daughter to him that would kill Goliath, 1 Samuel 17 verse 25, neither of them intending to force his daughter to marry such as she could not love, but both of them presuming upon their daughter's obedience, and submission to their father's will, though it might be contrary to their own humor or inclination. Caleb's family was not long honorable and wealthy, but religious. He that himself followed the Lord fully no doubt taught his children to do so, and therefore it could not but be a desirable match to any young gentleman. Caleb, in making the proposal, aims 1. To do service to his country by the reducing of that important place, and 2. To marry a daughter well, to a man of learning, that would have a particular affection for the city of books, and a man of war, that would be likely to serve his country, and do worthily in his generation. Could he but marry his child to a man of such a character, he would think her well bestowed, whether the share in the lot of his tribe were more or less. 3. The place was bravely taken by Othniel, a nephew of Caleb, whom probably Caleb had thoughts of when he made the proffer, verse 17. This Othniel, who thus signalized himself when he was young, had long after, in his advanced years, the honor to be both a deliverer and a judge in Israel, the first single person that presided in their affairs after Joshua's death. It is good for those who are setting out in the world to begin betimes with that which is great and good, that, excelling in service when they are young, they may excel in honor when they grow old. 4. Hereupon, all parties being agreed, Othniel married his cousin German Axa, Caleb's daughter. It is probable that he had a kindness for her before, which put him upon this bold undertaking to obtain her. Love to his country, an ambition of honor, and a desire to find favor with the princes of his people, might not have engaged him in this great action, but his affection for Axa did. This made it intolerable to him to think that any one should do more to win her favor than he would, and so inspired him with this generous fire. Thus is love strong as death, and jealousy cruel as the grave. 5. Because the historian is now upon the dividing of the land, he gives us an account of Axa's portion, which was in land, as more valuable because enjoyed by virtue of the divine promise, though we may suppose the conquerors of Canaan, who had had the spoil of so many rich cities, were full of money too. 1. Some land she obtained by Caleb's free grant, which was allowed while she married within her own tribe and family, as Zelophehad's daughters did. He gave her a south land, verse 19. Land indeed, but a south land, dry, and apt to be parched. 2. She obtained more upon her request. She would have had her husband to ask for a field, probably some particular field, or champaign ground, which belonged to Caleb's lot, and joined to that south land which he had settled upon his daughter at marriage. She thought her husband had the best interest in her father, who, no doubt, was extremely pleased with his late glorious achievement, but he thought it was more proper for her to ask, and she would be more likely to prevail. Accordingly she did, submitting to her husband's judgment, though contrary to her own, and she managed the undertaking with great address. First, she took the opportunity when her father brought her home to the house of her husband, when the satisfaction of having disposed of his daughters so well would make him think nothing too much to do for her. Secondly, she lighted off her ass in token of respect and reverence to her father, whom she would honor still, as much as before her marriage. She cried or sighed from off her ass, so the LXX. And the vulgar Latin read it. She expressed some grief and concern, that she might give her father occasion to ask her what she wanted. Thirdly, she calls it a blessing, because it would add much to the comfort of her settlement, and she was sure that, since she married not only with her father's consent, but in obedience to his command, he would not deny her his blessing. Fourthly, she asks only for the water, without which the ground she had would be of little use either for tillage or pasture, but she means the field in which the springs of water were. The modesty and reasonableness of her quest gave it a great advantage. Earth without water would be like a tree without sap, or the body of an animal without blood. Therefore, when God gathered the waters into one place, he wisely and graciously left some in every place, that the earth might be enriched for the service of man. See Psalm 104 verse 10, etc. Well, Axa gained her point. Her father gave her what she asked, and perhaps more, for he gave her the upper springs and the nether springs, 2 fields so called from the springs that were in them, as we commonly distinguish between the higher field and the lower field. Those who understand it, but of one field, watered both with the rain of heaven and the springs that issued out of the bowels of the earth, give countenance to the allusion we commonly make to this, when we pray for spiritual and heavenly blessings which relate to our souls as blessings of the upper springs, and those which relate to the body and the life that now is as blessings of the nether springs. From this story we learn, 1. That it is no breach of the 10th commandment moderately to desire those comforts and conveniences of this life which we see attainable in a fair and regular way. 2. That husbands and wives should mutually advise and jointly agree about that which is for the common good of their family, and much more should they concur in asking of their heavenly Father the best blessings, those of the upper springs. 3. That parents must never think that lost which is bestowed upon their children for their real advantage, but must be free in giving them portions as well as maintenance, especially when they are dutiful. Caleb had sons, 1 Chronicle 4:15, and yet gave thus liberally to his daughter. Those parents forget themselves and their relation who grudge their children what is convenient for them when they can conveniently part with it. The lot of Judah, 1444 BC. 20. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. 21. And the uttermost cities of the tribe of the children of Judah toward the coast of Edom southward were Kabzeel and Eder and Jagur, 22. And Kena, and Dimona, and Adatta, 23. And Kadesh, and Hazor and Ithnan, 24. Ziph, and Telem and Beloth, 25. And Hazor, Hadattah, and Kerioth, and Hezron, which is Hazor, 26. Ammon and Shema, and Melada, 27. And Hazar-Gaddah, and Heshmon and Beth-Palet, 28. And Hazar-Shual, and Beersheba, and Bizjothjah, 29. Bala, and Iim and Azim, 30. And Eltolad, and Chesel and Hormah, 31. And Ziklag, and Madmannah, and Sansannah, 32. And Lebaoth, and Shillim, and Ain, and Rimmon. All the cities are 29, with their villages, 33. And in the valley, Eshtael, and Zoriah, and Ashnah, 34. And Zanoah, and Engannim, Tapua, and Enam, 35. Jarmuth, and Adullam, Soko, and Azekah, 36. And Sharaim, and Adathaim, and Gedera, and Gederothaim, 14 cities with their villages, 37 Zenon and Hadashah, and Migdalgad, 38 and Dilean and Mizpeh and Joktheel, 39 Lachish and Bozkath and Eglon, 40 and Kabban, and Lamam and Kithlish, 41 and Gederoth, Beth Dagon, and Naamah, and Makkedah, 16 cities with their villages, 42 Libnah, and Ether and Ashan, 43 and Jiphthah and Ashnah, and Nezib, 44 and Keilah and Akzib and Mareshah, 9 cities with their villages, 45 Ekron with her towns and her villages, 46 from Ekron even unto the sea, all that lay near Ashdod, with their villages, 47 Ashdod with her towns and her villages, Gaza with her towns and her villages, unto the river of Egypt, and the great sea, and the border thereof, 48 and in the mountains. We have here a list of the several cities that fell within the lot of the tribe of Judah, which are mentioned by name, that they might know their own, and both keep it and keep to it, and might neither through cowardice nor sloth lose the possession of what was their own. 1. The cities are here named, and numbered in several classes, which they then could account for the reason of better than we can now. Here are, 1. Some that are said to be the uttermost cities towards the coast of Edom, verses 21 to 32. Here are 38 named, and yet said to be 29, verse 32, because 9 of these were afterwards transferred to the lot of Simeon, and are reckoned as belonging to that, as appears by comparing chapter 19 verse 2, etc. Therefore those only are counted, though the rest are named, which remain to Judah. 2. Others that are said to be in the valley, verse 33, are counted to be 14, yet 15 are named, but it is probable that Gederah and Gederothaim were either 2 names or 2 parts of one and the same city. 3. Then 16 are named without any head of distinction, verses 37 to 41, and 9 more, verse 42 to 44. 4. Then the 3 Philistine cities, Ekron, Ashdod, and Gaza, verse 45 to 47. 5. Cities in the mountains, 11 in all, v. 48 to 51, 9 more, v. 52 to 54, 10 more, verse 55 to 57, 6 more, verse 58 and 59, then 2, verse 60 and 6 in the wilderness, a part of the country not so thick of inhabitants as some others were. 2. Now here, 1. We do not find Bethlehem, which was afterwards the city of David, and was ennobled by the birth of our Lord Jesus in it. But that city, which at the best was but little among the thousands of Judah, Micah 5 verse 2, except that it was thus dignified, was now so little as not to be accounted one of the cities, but perhaps was one of the villages not named. Christ came to give honor to the places he was related to, not to receive honor from them. 2. Jerusalem is said to continue in the hands of the Jebusites, verse 63, for the children of Judah could not drive them out, through their sluggishness, stupidity, and unbelief. Had they attempted it with vigor and resolution, we have reason to think God would not have been wanting to them to give them success, but they could not do it, because they would not. Jerusalem was afterwards to be the holy city, the royal city, the city of the great king, the brightest ornament of all the land of Israel. God has designed it should be so. It may therefore be justly looked upon as a punishment of their neglect to conquer other cities which God had given them that they were so long kept out of this. 3. Among the cities of Judah, in all 114, we meet with Libnah, which in Joram's days revolted, and probably set up for a free independent state, 2 Kings 8 verse 22, and Lachish, where King Amaziah was slain, 1 Kings 14 verse 19. It led the dance in idolatry, Micah 1 verse 13. It was the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion. Gilo, Ahithophel's town, is here mentioned, and Tekoa, of which the prophet Amos was, and near which Jehoshaphat obtained that glorious victory, 2 Chronicles 20 verse 20, etc., and Mareshah, where Asa was a conqueror. Many of the cities of this tribe occur in the history of David's troubles. Adullam, Ziph, Keilah, Maon, Engedi, Ziklag, here reckoned in this tribe, were places near which David had most of his haunts, for though sometimes Saul drove him out from the inheritance of the Lord, yet he kept as close to it as he could. The wilderness of Judah he frequented much, and in it John Baptist preached, and there the kingdom of heaven commenced, Matthew 3 verse 1. The riches of this country no doubt answered Jacob's blessing of this tribe, that he should wash his garments in wine, Genesis 49 verse 11. And in general, Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise, not envy.